For Foodie Fridays today, we have the author of the Adobo Road Cookbook, a Filipino food journey. He's also the founder and co-owner of the first Filipino food truck here in Los Angeles called the Manila Machine. A couple of years ago, mga kababayan, I even lined up right there at UCLA and down the street on Satel. Kasama natin ngayong araw na ito si Marvin Gapultos, born and raised in Los Angeles, California. Marvin is the creator also of the celebrated food blog called Burnt Lumpia. With his unique approach to Filipino cooking, Marvin became the first Filipino-American food blogger to truly champion and showcase Filipino cuisine to a worldwide audience. Marvin's pioneering efforts and singular passion in promoting the food of the Philippines has made him one of the leading voices on Filipino cuisine. Thank you so much, Marvin, for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
This is so exciting. You have a cookbook out called the Adobo Road Cookbook.
I do.
Okay, well, I was thumbing through the photos and I'm noticing that these are all food that I grew up with.
Yes, I mean, it's a Filipino cookbook. It's just based on family recipes, of course, and also based on kind of, I guess, my viewpoint as a Filipino-American.
Okay, so how did you learn how to cook?
Just watching my mother and grandmother and my aunties a lot, but also just getting in the kitchen and kind of being self-taught as well, just trying out new things. And that's how I started my blog, just kind of, it was like a documentation of like my trials and tribulations in the kitchen. So just kind of a little of everything, watching my relatives, and then, you know, trial by fire in my kitchen.
Okay, so let's talk about Manila Machine. This was a very successful food truck. I remember lining up with tons of kids at UCLA, also down the street. Talk to me about the decision to come up with a food truck.
At the time, this was a few years ago, you know, the food truck phenomenon was just taking off, and there wasn't any Filipino food trucks. And, you know, being a food blogger and being Filipino, it's always been kind of my mission to kind of try and introduce Filipino food and Filipino flavors to the masses. So I thought, what better way than to take my blog recipes and transfer them to a food truck.
So what did you discover were the best sellers from your menu?
It's funny because it was a lot of very traditional Filipino food, like sisig, which is Filipino street food. And that was a great seller for me. And my pork belly and pineapple adobo was another great seller. And a lot of the basics, like just fried rice and lumpia. So it was great having that traditional Filipino food and non-Filipinos enjoying it as well.
Well, speaking of non-Filipinos, it's a given that the Filipinos will flock to the food truck, but a lot of non-Filipinos were also able to discover the flavors of the Philippines. What were the feedback that you would receive from the non-Filipinos tasting our food?
It was great, because I think one of the barriers to Filipino food not really being known is just a lack of awareness. And you know, non-Filipinos would say, oh, this just tastes great. Like these are flavors I'm used to in some ways, and also there are flavor combinations like the lime and citrus and vinegars that are being used in Filipino cuisine that might not be normal for a non-Filipino. So just introducing them to those bold Filipino flavors was fantastic.
Okay, so talk to us about the road to the Adobo Road Cookbook. How did you decide to come up with a cookbook?
It was something that I actually had wanted to do long before my blog, long before the food truck. That was always the end goal for me. And like I said, I've always wanted to introduce, you know, Filipino food, that part of our culture, even to Filipinos of younger generations who are Filipino, who might know Filipino food, but really don't have an appreciation or awareness of it. So it was always my goal to have a cookbook and to write and introduce that part of our culture.
So what are the challenges of creating something like this? Because I know you've had to have cooked every single thing that's in this book.
Yes, and that was tough. Just recipe testing, trying to get everything right, taking the pictures.
You took the pictures. I mean, look at this. This beautiful, beautiful photos.
So yeah, I mean,
sardinas.
Yes, and it's exactly, that's kind of my take on legal sardines, just the canned sardines, so you could make it yourself fresh, with fresh ingredients.
Amazing. So how would you describe your kind of style as a chef?
I guess it's just a Filipino-American perspective, a kind of, you know, somebody who didn't necessarily, like I mentioned younger Filipinos earlier who might not have had an awareness, and I kind of came to Filipino food later in my life after I got married and I was away from home and I kind of missed my mom's cooking. So I guess my perspective is just, you know, a Filipino-American take with fresh ingredients, but still traditional. You know, everything in my cookbook is Filipino food.
Amazing. And also, I know that you have children.
Yes.
And I saw a photo of your son eating a buche.
Yeah, and that's a good part about writing the cookbook is I have little testers.
You have testers.
Exactly. So, and that's another thing. Just kind of, that was another goal of mine, was just to, even just passing on my own family recipes down to my kids, because if I didn't, it was going to end, you know. So that's a good part for Filipinos, just, you know, passing on parts of our culture to the younger generations.
Wonderful. Okay, when we return here on Kababayan Today, we're going to tell all of you Kababayans how you can get a copy of this book, because Marvin Gapultos is giving one away for one special viewer. We'll be right back.